is going to come up and bring the word. And she is amazing because, like, I don't, just like such a heart of a worshiper. And so, like, just like she loves God so much. Like, if she speaks, you can't help but be inspired to, like, want to love God more. So, anyway, Sarah.
Thank you. Am I on? Well, good morning. Hello. We've all had our coffee, our tea, our water. No, I hear that. But for y'all's sake, I'm going decaf. I'm a little, anyway. I'm going to open us in prayer. Lord, thank you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for this opportunity to come together, to know you more, to know you deeper. And I pray, Father, that every heart, that you would just speak every heart what they need through what you put on my heart. And I thank you for your presence. For without you, we have nothing. And I just thank you that you love us so deeply and so richly that you would take notice of us. And I just thank you, Father, for the rest of this day, that you just continue to enlighten and increase our capacity for you and our understanding of you. In Jesus' name, amen. So before I get into the meat, I'm going to move that. I'm a walker. So I've been praying about this for a few months now, before I even knew I was going to speak. And kind of a little bit background of worship is such a huge part of me and of my expression towards God. And just a little background, and I promise it has a point. So growing up, some of y'all have heard my testimony, some of you don't know who I am, and that's cool. But my mom she was a dance leader at our church, and so she always taught us the significance of worship, that it's not just something that you're late to, or it's not just fun singing. It is a holy purpose, and it's a holy calling to be called a worshiper. And the church I grew up in was very diverse. I mean, we had homeless people in our church. We had rich doctors and cousins of Nigerian governors of provinces in our church, like professors. We had all kinds of people. And amidst all that diversity and backgrounds, I mean, right now you can't even post on Facebook without it coming back with someone getting offended. With all that diversity, we would all come together to worship. And it was the most beautiful. I really believe God gave me a picture, a just small sliver of what heaven will be like. Every background, every diversity laid down at the foot of the cross for one purpose, and that's to worship the God we serve. And it was beautiful. And it wasn't all in English. It was Spanish. We had languages from all over, Filipino, Vietnamese, all over the world, just coming in their own, with what they had, their own background, to worship the Father of lights. And it was just magnificent. So, but what struck me even more was when those individuals would leave that place and leave that intensity and that beauty, but their life, the worship didn't stop. Their life became this beautiful song of worship to the Creator. And you could tell those people who lived a life of worship and had a heart of worship, because it just wasn't on Sundays or Wednesday nights. It was an everyday thing. And you just wanted to be around those people because you could just tell the presence of God was with them at all times. And I think that is what struck me as a young person so profoundly, were those people that I got to know, those kind of people, and got to see and be like, that's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want my life to look like. And I think that it's just such a beautiful thing that God has called us to. It's not something we have to strive for. It's a beautiful calling. We're called to do that. We're made to do that. So to get to the point of what I'm saying, we're going to establish kind of a baseline, because we all have different backgrounds in here, different understandings. So to make what I'm saying make sense, I'm going to establish a baseline with you. First, what is worship? In the dictionary of Sarah, the ever-renowned dictionary of Sarah, It is the desire to be with or in his presence and to show devotion by yielding to God in faith. It's not a Sunday once in a while as we have time. It is a constant connection. It's a consistent seeking of his presence. And it requires faith. So before I get ahead of myself, because I will do that, let's go to John 4, 22 through 24. We will have it up there as they already do because they're awesome like that. If you do not have your Bible or do not flip fast enough, I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be his worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. So some context. This is not in the temple. He's not talking to Pharisees. He is talking to a Samaritan woman at a well. Jews and Samaritans, many of you may already know this, but they don't like each other. They do not get along, and they are like, you walk on the opposite side of the street of each other. And he's speaking to her, and he just told her past, and she's just amazed. She's like, well, answer me this. Is Jerusalem really the place of worship, or is it our mountain? Because our Father said it's this. And then he responds to her in that. He says, true worshipers must worship him in spirit and truth. So I did a little digging. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got this. Spirit and truth, right? So I looked at the Greek. And I studied Greek for a couple of years in college. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So spirit in Greek is pneuma. It's breath or spirit. Rational soul is not just like figuratively the spirit, but it's a rational soul and your mental disposition. I find that so intriguing how it encompasses not just your emotions. It's not just your emotions. It is your mental disposition. It's your rational soul. There's logic to this. It's all of you. And then truth, which I wrote it in Greek, so excuse me as I try to pronounce this. Proskuneo, it's worship. The illustration it gave in my dictionary was it's derived from a word that means kind of kiss like a dog licking his master's hand. I thought that was a very interesting picture because to me, a dog licking my hand is very annoying. But it's just this unreserved affection. And to adore, and it goes on, to adore, to do reverence. And I found that very, again, I'm going to say interesting, because it's not just a state of heart. It requires a mental disposition. It encompasses a mental disposition, and it requires an action. And we'll get into action later. So we come with spirit. True worshipers worship in spirit and truth. What does that mean to us? And kind of how I see it is we come with a vulnerability and an honesty. We do not, it feels like in this society we have to put on a face. We have to have our social media projection of who we are. But when we come to him, we don't come with that facade. We come with vulnerability. And if you look at vulnerability, it means to be exposed to harm and exposed. You're putting yourself out there essentially. And what a beautiful way to put yourself out there. It is uncomfortable sometimes. It is revealing. But you do it because he is worthy. And you come with an honesty because really he's the God of all. He's the Alpha and Omega. He knows all things. Yet we humans think we can hide from him. And I find that kind of funny how we are wired that way. It's like this fear response. We're wired to think we can hide from him. So I'm going to go to John 11, 25 through 26. He's talking to Martha. Lazarus just died, and he waited a couple days. He lingered, and she runs out to him out the outskirts of town, and she's upset because she just lost her brother. And he was supposed to come, and he didn't. And Jesus said to her, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? And that last part, do you believe this, struck me the greatest, because she's like, yeah, of course, someday we will be resurrected. He goes, no, I am the resurrection life. Do you believe this? And sometimes we got to ask ourselves, what do we truly believe? Because if you look at your actions, you look at your choices in your life in regards to worship and how you live, does it profess and does it say, I truly believe that he is the resurrection of life? Is he truly your life? You need to believe. The revelation of God it should not just be, yes, he saved you, that's the beginning, that's wonderful, and that's so powerful. He did all of it. It needs to be growing, it needs to be evolving, because that is worship, is our growth, our maturing, and I'm getting ahead of myself. But do you truly believe? In your heart of hearts, do you truly believe? Okay, so now we've established believing is important. I think that's a pretty good baseline. That's a good baseline. I mean, believing is important. I mean, Hebrews 11:6 says, for it is impossible to please God without faith. It's impossible. You just can't do it. Not going to happen. You can keep trying, but it's not going to happen. So we did that. Now, what is the cost of worship? We'll get to where it starts, but what is the cost? Because everything has a cost. I learned in my college economics class, there is no such thing as a free lunch. I'm teaching my children that. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything costs. Everything. Everything has a cost. Whether it's free to you, it costs someone else down the line. Everything has a cost. So worship has a cost. So we're going to go to John 14:23. Again, it'll be on the screen. I'm going through these pretty quickly. Jesus answered and said to him, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word, and my Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our abode with him. Now, remember the word abode, because we'll come to it in a little bit, though it probably will be sooner rather than later, because I'm going through my outline very quickly. But he says, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. And I'm going to wager that this is not going to be the fun part, so just bear with me as we go. It costs obedience. Obedience is a cost of worship. He says, if you love me, you will keep my commands. You can't say you love God and then go out and do whatever you want. And I know that sounds harsh and not fun, but bear with me. There is fun and beauty in that. So it costs obedience. And obedience in and of itself is an act of worship. When you obey God, when you let go of that person you've hold to, but they're not bringing good fruit in your life, you let them go. That's obedience and that's worship. When you give up things and break the addiction, you break the hurt, the resentment, when you let those things go and obey, because he says you must forgive as I've forgiven you. Love, how can you say you love God when you don't love your brother? If we can work towards those things and set our hearts and minds towards those things, then we obey. And when we obey, you say, God, I love you. It's just like when your children obey you. It's like saying, Mom, Dad, I love you. I trust you enough to do what you say. It's very simple. The things of God are not complicated. They're very simple. Not so easy to do when we try to do it in our own power, but it's not complicated. Obey. I'm sorry, I know no one likes to hear that word. It's just like taboo. But it needs to be said, because I really believe in my heart, because I'm like, God, that's such a strong word. And I sense that even though many of you in this room have been serving God actively for a while, he wants to remind us, it's not a stasis. You have not arrived yet. You are pressing towards that mark. You are pressing. And there are things that will require a greater cost for you to obey him as you mature and as you grow. You are not off the hook just because you've been serving God for a long time. I am not off the hook just because I've been serving God since I'm like 20 years now, going on 20 years. I'm not off the hook. He expects more and he requires more, because I said Lord, I am yours, here I am. And he says, okay, let's test this. Are you really mine? You say it. Do you really believe it enough to sacrifice and enough to obey me? And it's like, oh, okay, yes, I will do it. I will do it in faith because in the end, he's going to have to help me through it. Is that how it really goes? He really's got to help us let go of some of that stuff. Obedience requires faith, as we just said, and shows love to a worthy God. We don't obey because we have to. I mean, everyone knows those children. Okay, Mom. And they go and do it, and they sass off some more and yell something, mutter something as they walk away. We don't obey because we have to. We obey because he did it all. He is worth it all because he did it all. If he gave everything, he sacrificed everything. He held nothing back for us. Why should we? Why should we hold back? Fear? Where's your fear getting you now? Resentment? What is it getting you? Because I know when I walk in fear, it gives me a whole lot of insecurity and a whole lot of nothing. And just some trouble, too, on top of it. So, he's worthy. Obedience brings an abiding. And I told you that abode would come back. It brings an abiding in God's presence. It opens a door and a way for us to have that constant access, that constant and consistent dwelling and moving in his spirit. And you're like, Sarah, I don't even know if I can recognize his presence, let alone consistently live in it. And that is where we're going right now. Like, so soon, it's now. Because I get it. It took me years. It took me almost a decade to get this stuff. Not just, yes, I know worship. Yes, thank you, Jesus. It's wonderful. But worship is so much more than feelings. It's so much more than a moment in time. It is our life. It is what our life says about God. And it's what we say about him. Do we truly believe? Are we willing to obey and give him all that we are? And that is, with how busy life gets and all the things, it is easy to forget that. It's easy to be distracted. I am the queen of distraction, and my husband doesn't help me either, because he's very good at, oh, Sarah, look at this. And I'm like, ah. So I get it. It's life happens, things happen. But when, as Sally said, when we want to encounter him, we posture our hearts towards him, it changes everything around us. It changes. Have you ever been in that place where you're having a really, really good time, and then someone who's just kind of contentious walks in and just the atmosphere and mood changes? And you're like, oh my God, I'm very sensitive to how things feel and the surrounding areas, and I can feel people's stress. And when someone that's like very stressed out comes in, I'm like, okay, let me take a step back. Let me find a way to get out of this nicely, because I can just feel it, and it attacks me almost. Sorry, I lost my point. That's what happens when, I had a point in that. That's what happens when we do not let it go. I'll come back to it when I remember. Okay, let's go move on. Excuse me. Now, we talked about the cost of worship. We've done like the fine print. Do you believe worship costs? It costs obedience. It costs the hard stuff. Now, where do we start? Where does worship start? Do we really have to raise our hands? And I'm not going to go into that in detail. Do we really have to go up the altar to pray? Do we really have to do that stuff? And I'm not going to answer that right now. What I will say is worship starts in our heart. Worship begins in our innermost being. It begins with our motivation in our heart. So in Proverbs, many of you have heard this, Proverbs 4:23, it's not a new verse. I'm doing the Passion Translation. I'm kind of switching between translations, so bear with me. So above all, guard the affections of your heart, for they affect all that you are. Pay attention to the well-being of your innermost being, for from there flows the well springs of life. And I would love to take credit for worship starts in the heart. I learned this through a worship pastor in Bible school. That was his slogan. Every time he would teach, this would come out. Worship starts in the heart. I mean, I've heard it 1,000 times, and after 1,000 times, it better stick, right? So it stuck. But it's true. Worship starts in your heart. Where is your heart? So we've talked about, do you believe? Okay, yes, we're there. Check it off. We're good. We believe. We truly believe that God is worth it. Are we obeying? Well, we're working on it. Okay, we're in progress. Check. But where do we start? If you came and you're like, I don't even know if I recognize the presence. Everyone's like, oh, do you feel that's so beautiful? His presence is so strong. And you're like, what? I don't know what you're talking about. If you're not there yet, and that's okay. Start with your heart. Where's your heart? Are you focused in your life, in your everything you're doing? Are you focused? God, you're good. Are you thinking about him like you would when you're lovesick? When you're first in love, you're like, oh, he's just so wonderful. So-and-so is just amazing. And Mrs. So-and-so, you do those things when you're in love. You do come on. We've all done it. I have notebooks. You can try to be all cool, but we know what's really going on. It starts in our heart. Are you thinking about him? Is he on your mind? Are you thinking, God, I really do want to obey you. I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. Worship sounds awesome. I see everyone else enjoying it, but I'm not there yet. That's a great place to be because your heart is being positioned to focus on him. It's being positioned to where he wants you to be because it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about him. So worship starts in the heart. There's no formula. I'm a very expressive worshiper. I always have been. I grew up in a very charismatic background. But I recognize that is not the same for everyone. My husband, keep shaking that. My husband has he has charismatic background, but he grew up in a very conservative, grew up in a variety of churches, but because he lived overseas, but very conservative background. So for him, he loves it. He loves the charismatic, but for him, his worship is very different. It's playing on the guitar or singing out to God. It's standing still and just soaking it in. It's different. Everyone's expression is different because, like Trisha said, Sally said, we all have different expressions. We're made so differently that it's not a formula. We're not all going to look the same, and that's okay. So let that be alleviated. I'm not here to tell you have to raise your hands or bow at the altar. I'm not here to tell you that because that's not the point of what God's heart for you is. He wants you to recognize who he is and have a revelation of who he is because once you do, that outpouring and the love and the affection that you will show him it'll come. And then once it starts coming in Sunday services and starts coming in your quiet time, then it'll start coming in everything that you do. You won't want to speak harshly to people because you love him and you want to make your daddy happy. You want Father to be happy. You want God to be happy with who you are. You will take a risk and buy something for someone you don't know and it makes you uncomfortable because you feel that it should be done and you want to make God happy. That is what worship looks like, hands and feet. You will be kind to the person who is hateful towards you because you know that God loves them and regardless of their motivation, you are accountable to the Father and you want to be pleasing to the Father. So it starts with our heart. We all have unique expressions, and that's okay. That's beautiful. I want to reiterate that. It's beautiful. It's okay. Your expression is not my expression, and my expression is not your expression. It's not a comparison game. Trisha is not more holy than me because she does a jig or raises her hands or sings louder. I'm not holier than someone who stands there quietly and just takes it all in. It's not a comparison game. And I really feel that we need to be free from that. Because the point is unity in the Spirit. The point is bringing the Spirit down on earth and letting his will have his way because we are his light. We are his messengers in this broken world. And the point is not a comparison game. That's a distraction. It's a distraction. It's not the point. The point is to give him everything we are and bring his glory to earth. So Secondly, it starts in our heart, and that's wonderful, expressing your ways, but worship is also an action verb. And the beautiful thing about action verbs, there's so many different kinds. I just said we have unique expressions, but it's also an action verb. And this is where the unique expression comes in. There are so many different types of action verbs. You know how I know? Because I'm homeschooling a 4th grader right now, and that's what we're studying. Whether it's to bow, to raise your hands, to give, to jump, to sing, there's so many ways to worship the Father in your life that it's only limited to your imagination and your willingness to obey and to give. You limit yourself on where you go with God. And I know that sounds like, but we do. How far we go, how deep our understanding, how much we want to know from God is only limited by ourselves. So next, a lifestyle worship. And I'm going to go there. We already talked obedience, so just bear with me. A lifestyle worship deepens and grows in our quiet time with God. You want to know how to recognize his presence, how to recognize when he's speaking to you, when he's moving and leading you to do something. Let me ask you this. Are you spending time with God? Are you reading his word? Are you doing like what we did last night? Are you being still in his presence? Are you talking to him? And remember, talking means like it's communications 2 ways. Are you making time to listen? And I know the to-do list is long. It is never ending. I really do, because it's starting to overwhelm me right now. However, we've got to acknowledge that there's stuff to do and let it go and spend time in his presence and not chase all those squirrels that are going around in our brain. There's a lot of squirrels. I mean, legit, like this week has been squirrel. I mean, it's been bad. So it begins in our heart. It's an action verb, and it's a lifestyle worship deepens our awareness of what God's doing and how he's moving, deepens and is accentuated by the time we spend with him. And I'm not saying you have to bow down for hours at a time, because that may not be your season. Maybe it is, and that's wonderful. Please do it. If that's where you are and that's where your faith is, do it. But if that's not where you are, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, are you making the time to get to know him? When you met your husband's a person you're interested, best friend, you do not say, oh, you're my bestie. We met 5 minutes ago. I mean, my 5-year-old does. But as adults, we tend to be a little more guarded. It takes time. It takes getting to know them. It takes activities and coffee dates and questions and interest in the other person. Are you interested in what God has for you? Are you interested in who he is? Because I feel, this is my personal opinion. It does not reflect the opinion of others. I feel that we have made worship, a lot of our songs and worship, I just started noticing this. We've made worship about us. It's not about us. I need to stop moving. It's not about us. It's about him. We've lost sight because he's so generous and so kind that when we come to him and we surrender and we sing and praise and he's so pleased with us, he can't help it. He pours out. He pours out. But I feel we've lost sight of what the point of worship is, what the point of our lives are, and what the point of what we're supposed to be doing. Because we've made it about us. And yes, there's problems, there's hardships, there's good, there's bad. It's real, it's valid, but it's not the point. The point is him and knowing him. Now, I'm going to give you some examples of some worshipers I have loved reading it, and there's no slides, so just bear with me. First example, the man himself, Jesus. I was reading this Beth Moore. I love the book of John. I love anything the disciple John wrote. Not John the Baptist, but the disciple John. And I've been reading Beth Moore's book about the beloved disciple John, because every time I read 1 John, 2 John, any John book in the Bible, it just resonates with me. And so I started reading this, and she pointed out, and something I kind of knew, but it never dawned on me. Even Jesus took time to be with the Father. He would preach and do these wonderful things, walk on water, feed 5,000 people, not men, not including women and children. He would do all these wonderful acts. He would heal. He would cast out demons. He would do all these wonderful things. But then he would sneak away to be with the Father. And even when he was approaching his death, he went up to the mountain, and of course he had his chosen 3 to go with him. He's like, hey, be mindful, keep a lookout. And he goes, and he's so distressed, he's bleeding. I mean, he cries out blood, and it's just getting real. And he says, not my will, but yours be done. And I'm thinking, I'm like, have I been willing to obey to the point of death? To the point of death of a dream? Have I been willing to obey? Have I been willing to let my life say that God is above all, even if it means death of my dreams, my hopes, physical death? Am I willing to give it all like Jesus did? And some days I'm like, yeah, I'm for it. And some days I'm like, oh, okay, God, we need to work on that. We need to work on my heart. The next person we all know and love, David. He's very popular. He's known as the man after God's own heart. And I was like, I want to be known like that. I want to be like a David. I want, when I get to heaven, David's like, yeah, Sarah, I got you. You're a woman after God's own heart. I got you, without the killing. Just saying. So David, he started in the fields. Just so you're ready, let's go to 2 Samuel 6, verse 14. I'll give you some time to get there, because I'm getting there too. So he started in the fields. He was a shepherd. He would play his instrument. He would watch the sheep. He would do a whole lot of nothing, sometimes kill a bear, a lion, He would do the stuff. And then his time came. So he became king after a lot of challenges, some created by himself and some not. So he's king, and the context of this verse, I'm reading in the Amplified. Actually, now I will be reading in the Amplified. The context of this verse, which I found so profound. And David was dancing before the Lord. So they just brought the tabernacle. No. Ark, thank you. I was like, that's not the right word. They were bringing the ark. They had left it in a place because someone touched it. He dropped dead. He was trying to save it from falling. He dropped dead. David was just miffed with God. He was like, that's not cool, man. He's miffed. He's upset. So they leave it in this barn. And then David hears that this person's being blessed, that his household's expanding, that just the blessings of God are being poured down. He's like, wait a minute. I want some of that. So they finally get it back to Jerusalem, and they're worshiping. They're having a great old time. And that's where we're picking up David. And David was dancing before the Lord with great enthusiasm. And David was wearing a linen ephod, a priest's upper garment. I think that's all he was wearing. So David and all the house of Israel were bringing the ark of the Lord up to the city of David with shouts and with the sound of a trumpet. And then as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, I'm going to say this wrong, Michal? Okay, Saul's daughter, David's wife, looked down from the window above and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord. She felt contempt for him in her heart because she thought he was undignified. That's not how a king should act, right? And then we're going to jump to verse 20. So he goes and blesses the city, and he comes back home to bless his house. Then David returned to bless his household. But his wife, the daughter of Saul, Michal, I'm saying that wrong probably, but came out to meet David and said, how glorious and distinguished, this is how I imagine it. She's like, oh, how glorious and distinguished was the king of Israel today, who uncovered himself and stripped off the kingly robes in the eyes of his servants' maids, like one of the riffraff who shamelessly uncovers himself. So David said to Michal, it was before the Lord that I did this, who chose me above your father, burn, and all his house, to appoint me as ruler over Israel, the people of the Lord. Therefore I will celebrate and pure enjoyment before the Lord. Yet I will demean myself even more than this, and will be humbled in my own sight. And yours as I please, but by the maids whom you mentioned, because Amplified has that nice little parentheses and brackets. But by the maids who you mentioned, by them I shall be held in honor. And let's hear the consequence of his wife's attitude. Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no child to the day of her death. That's a bit harsh. But what I love, let's focus back on David. That's a consequence. Everything we do has consequences. But David, king of Israel, they were a unified kingdom at this time, king of all Israel, slayer of giants, his army and his band of riffraffs defeated some of the greatest warriors of their time. And he danced his clothes off before the Lord. He gave it all. He surrendered everything, and he did not care because he recognized the point of it all. The point was the glory of God, and a relationship with him was more important than his dignity and his stature, because he recognized that God gave that to him and God can take it away. So I share that because, it's one thing to say I worship, but these were like all-star worshipers, all-star people in the Bible, right? You learn about them since you were a kid, and they gave it all. Let me ask you, are you willing to let go of your dignity and your stature to worship the Father, to look a little foolish and a little silly? I find that sometimes the answer is yes for me, and sometimes I'm like, yeah, I need to work on that. So what's the point? It's well and good. Yes, we need to be worshipers. Yes, it's wonderful. And the point is found in Romans 12:1, and I'll be reading this one from the Passion Translation, so hopefully you're not getting whiplash from the constant translation change. Beloved friends, that's very short. Okay, beloved friends, what should be our proper response to God's marvelous mercies? I encourage you to surrender yourselves to God to be his sacred, living sacrifices and live in holiness, experiencing all that delights his heart, for this becomes your genuine expression of worship. Now, I'm going to do a little caveat. Sacrifice was big in the Old Testament. That's how they cleansed themselves, brought purity, worshiped. It was a big deal. It was a big part. But when Jesus came, he became the ultimate sacrifice and became the mediator between the Father and us. Okay, many of you already know this and are aware of this. For those who may not understand, I want to make sure that's given context to. So, our genuine expression of worship is to be a sacred, living sacrifice. I find that amazing. When things are sacrificed, they're put on fire and they're burned. And what a light to the world. Painful at times, but what a light. Because I don't remember the quote, but there's a quote that says, you don't need to preach, you just need to live your life on fire and they'll come and ask questions. And I'm very much paraphrasing this. It just, when we're living as living sacrifices, we're living for the purpose of him. It becomes this beautiful thing. And I think one of the words that struck me is not living, not sacrifice, but in Greek, present. And again, I wrote this in Greek. I was trying to be too cool. Thank you. Paristemi, it also means to yield, to show. So part of presenting is yielding. And that's a hard word because when you come up to those yield signs when you're driving, sometimes they're a hard yield for one reason or another, and sometimes they're a soft. And I believe, in what I kind of sense, is that it's our choice how we yield. It's either going to be a hard yield because something is going to barrel over you, or it's going to be your choice to soft yield and let God make a way for you. And I personally would rather have a soft yield than a hard stop. And because you know what that, yield. If you don't yield in time, it becomes a hard stop. So, just saying. So the choice is yours. How you live your living sacrifice, because you've already made the choice to serve God. You're here because you want more of him. Who else would come on a Saturday morning to hear more about God? You apparently want him. You want to know him. You want to work through some things. Whether you need deliverance, you need freedom from fear, you need whatever you need, and the reason you came. He will meet that need. Will you yield to let him do it? So let's end on a high note. Psalms 29:2. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in holy array. And I put that in there because I know obedience, sacrifice, those are really hard words, and they're not fun words. But when you love God and when you truly get what he did for you, it will not be a striving, it will not be a labor-intensive work where you have to motivate yourself like the train. I think I can, I think I can, I think you can. It'll be an outflowing of your love and your affection for him. It'll become who you are. And as you spend time with him, that understanding of who he is will deepen and it'll grow. And then it'll be beyond gifts. It'll be who you are. And I'm going to share this one example, not because I'm cool, but because it stopped me in my tracks. So I used to work for a bank before I was married. I did it during college. And I worked with these people. I was in college ministry. I was going to school full time. I was working full time. And I really wanted people to know, but I'm not the evangelistic type. I don't go up and preach on soapboxes. It's not my thing. I'm not good at it. And I mumble over my words terribly. But I just wanted people to know that God loved them. That's my heart. That's my mission in life, is that people know that they are loved. And so I would love on my coworkers. I was goofy. I made tons of mistakes. I was not a star employee because I somehow misappropriated $300 and got written up for it. I was not the star employee, I promise you. I learned how to be a star employee, but I made a bunch of big mistakes. And I moved on from that job, lost contact with all those people. Well, about 3 months ago, out of the blue, I was feeling really down. I was like, okay, God, I'm in the thick of the trenches. I'm wrangling children, homeschooling. I'm in over my head. What is the point? How am I bringing you glory when I'm in the thick of it? And I don't feel like I'm doing it very well right now. I'm not being, Jesus, this is all for you. It's worship. I'm not like that. I'm more of, I need you, Jesus, to come to my rescue. That's more where I was. And then I get this message from an old coworker of mine. I loved her. She was wonderful. But she rejected all things God. She thought I was crazy to live for God, and we loved each other because we just got along and she was fun. And I was kooky and dorky. And she messaged me and she said that she was in church, which was huge. She did not go to church when I knew her. She was in church and the pastor was saying, think back to when the last person you met that truly lived the Christian life. And she's like, Sarah, and Grant, I have not seen her in 12 years. I've not seen her. I've not talked to her. She says, the only person I could think of was you. And I'm like, one, I started bawling. And two, I was like, how sad is that? She goes to church, guys. She goes to church. I don't know what her relationship status is with God. I don't know if it's in a relationship, totally committed. I don't know. But that one, she remembered me from 12 years ago. And like I said, I was not a model employee. I showed up late. I did homework at times because I was a college student. But she says, the only person I remember being a true Christian was you. And I'm like, wow, what does that say about the church? But wow. Because it wasn't how right I had things. It wasn't how awesome I was. It was that I just wanted to know him. I just wanted people to understand that they are loved, because I know from personal experience what it means to be rejected and to be cast aside. I know what it means to have people drop you and say, you're not good enough. I know what that feels like, and I know those stings. So I want people to know that those things mean nothing in comparison with the love of God, and he is worth every sacrifice, every worship, every obedience, because he is the point of it all. And without him, we are nothing. And I know that sounds a bit dramatic and a bit crazy, but he says, I am the way and I am the life. I am the resurrection and I am the life. I'm the way, the truth, the life. You want to know what's really going on? You want to know what the truth is, and you're struggling with what you believe and you're not really sure if you're all totally sold out on this Jesus thing? Look into him. And I guarantee it, you will find what you've been looking for. Because he is it. He is it. He is the righteousness. He is the love. He's the full expression of who God is. So you want to know what this whole God thing's about? Maybe some of you are like, I'm struggling. I've been serving God, but I'm in this place of stale. Like, it just feels stale. It doesn't feel like it used to. Or maybe I don't even know if I want to still believe in God. And I really believe that he has wanted to share that there's so much more than what you've had and what you've been. And there's so much more than the broken people that you come across. Maybe some Christians said some horrible things, and they said they were Christians. They did all the right things, but they did some horrible things to you. I get it. My biological father was a pastor, and he lied to me more than once, and he left more than once. I get it. People are broken. They do broken things, but God is not broken. He is not a man. He is not a human. He does not lie. He's not capable of it. It's not even in his being. It's just not in his hardwiring. So back to my point, was the point of worship is to adore him. To move the knowledge from our head and our logic to our hearts, and to adore him as he deserves. And when we do that, it aligns our perspective with his perspective. You want encounters with God. You want to have that life-changing encounter that Sally spoke about last night. Align your perspective with his through worship. Encounter him through worship. Because when you say, here I am, it could be as simple as, God, I don't know what I'm doing, but I trust you. I'm here. And he will do it. He will. Now, another thing, as I continue, this allows us to abide. And that's kind of the point. He says, as you obey, I will abide in you and you will abide in me. That's how people will know. That's how you will show the love, is abiding. You want to get to that point of abiding where it's a constant, consistent connection. It's not a Sunday thing. It's not a small group thing. It is a constant, not even an Easter, Christmas thing. It is a consistent, constant relationship. This allows us to abide. As we give, he's so gracious and so generous that he pours out. He meets every need, allowing us to be like him. You're like, Sarah, I'm not there. I'm just bound by this fear. I'm bound by this anger. People did wrong by me. They hurt me. They disappointed me. But the beautiful thing is when you give and you sacrifice what left you have of emotional and mental energy, when you give it to him, he does this beautiful thing and he just pours more than you can ask back into you. And the point of worship is not just to get the gifts. It's not just to see the Spirit move and woo, the song and dance. The point is to be with him. So to sum it up, I found this really amazing quote. I think it sums up so well. Worship changes the worshiper into the image of the one worshipped. It's said by Jack Hayford, the point is to be like Jesus, right? How do you get there? Where do you start? One, you start with believing. And then you start with worship. You come in vulnerability and honesty, not hiding, not keeping things back. You come with vulnerability and honesty, and you sacrifice. You pay the cost. You obey, because if you truly love him, you will. So before we close out, as I was praying and preparing and praying and marking things out, and my mind was just full of bunny trails. But in the midst of all of that, God kind of gave me a vision of what he wants to do in this time, specifically the conference, but in this time, I had a vision of a prison cell, and there was this woman just holding on, and she, it's a close-up. I mean, nostril hairs and everything. It's a close-up, and she's like, help me, let me out, I'm innocent, I swear, help me, please. And then, as all the great film directors do, they pan back, and you get a bigger picture of the jail cell, and you see that the door is open, and she is just so focused on, let me out, I'm innocent, please let me out, I just want out, I just need to be free. And the door is open the whole time. And the point of sharing that is, and what God kind of related to me, is worship is a step of faith to reach freedom. Whether that's freedom from addiction, from unforgiveness, whether it's just crippling fear or health issues, worship is that step of faith. Laying aside your agenda, laying aside your wants, your needs, and putting him first. In Matthew, it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all the rest shall fall into place or follow, depending on translation. Are you really willing? Do you really want that freedom enough, and that restoration enough, or whatever you need enough to put aside the looming problems and the looming challenges you face to seek him? And I get it. Some of those challenges are big. They're big. They're hard. They're not easy. They're life-threatening. However valid those concerns are, he is so much bigger and so much better. And when you get sight of who he is and understand what he wants for you, and seek him not for the gifts, not for moves or casting out and looking cool, being on TBN or whatever. I mean, I don't know what the cool thing is. Bethel, I don't know. I can't keep track of all the trends. Anyway, whatever, if you put him first, he will take you where you need to go. He will lead you, and things will just begin to fall into place. I've seen it happen in my life, that when I keep sight of him and make him my priority, things just come and they fall into place. I could tell you story after story. And when I lose sight of the point of who I am, because we were made to worship. And the Psalm says, if we do not do it, the rocks will cry out. We are made to worship. It is our calling, and if you don't keep sight of him, you will worship something. Whether it's the Astros, the Yankees, another sports team, your family, you will worship something. We are made to worship because he needs the glory, because he is just that awesome. If you don't keep sight of him, you will worship something. It's just, will that something be what you need to worship? And my answer is no, because, it's an idol. Anyway, I won't go into that whole other topic. But that's kind of all I had. If you want to come up, or you want me to, if y'all need, okay. Now, if that's you, and you feel like you've been in that jail cell, screaming for freedom, screaming, and you feel like no one's heard you, God has not heard you, then this is your day for prayer. This is your day. Come up, take that step of faith, and as we time, whether it's going to the side and worship, and truly digging in, and letting all distractions fall away, this is your time. Do not leave this place the same way, because you don't have to. Why would you? You don't have to. You're not called to be bound in bondage. You're not called to be distracted. You're called to worship. You're called for a purpose, and he has good things for you. That's his promise. And if you want those good things, today is your day. So if you feel that's you, we're going to take a moment like we did last night and just make room for him. But if you need prayer, we have a prayer team who will come and be happy to pray for you. If you feel that specifically speaks to you, that vision where you need to take that step and you want prayer, I'm happy to pray. We also have an amazing prayer team, and we will stand in agreement with you, because it says where two or more are gathered, he is in our midst. It's a guarantee that he will be here, because he can't resist his people. He loves his people. So as we take this time, I will be up here if you need prayer, and I will turn the mic off so no one will hear. And let's just give him space to work, space to speak.